So, for the longest time, probably most of my life, I have been focusing on the how and the what and the where and the when. And I believe probably about 7 or more years ago, God began to deal with me about the who and the why. And it's been a long journey that will never end, but I have realized that, it's the reason why I'm here and I'm sharing with you all. And I realized also that I had been wearing a lot of masks. I mean, a lot of masks. And in time, they began to be a little bit more cumbersome for me. I think I began to outgrow them, get frustrated with them. They didn't fit right. And over time, I recognized that this is really not going to work. I wore the mask, probably the most prominent one of having it all together. And I remember when a friend of mine, we were going through a spiritual makeover mentoring program back in 2008 when the Lord really, well, prior to that, but was a real shift for me in my life. But she said to me, "Wow, Charlene, I didn't know you were so broken. You seem to have it all together." And over time people have told me that, and I've heard it, but I didn't really hear it until she said it to me. And so I thought about that, and I'm just like, wow. It's also the time when I began to really be forthcoming about what I was struggling with. And I think that it was something that, I talked a little bit about in my therapy sessions when I started going to counseling. But, having it all together. But and I think probably because of my giftings, I'm an encourager. Always been. I didn't really kind of know what the term was. But it's part of my gifting, and I also have a heart for people with my compassion gift most times. But I can sense something, I can sense when the person is broken or hurting. The person doesn't even have to open up their mouth, but sometimes, and I think it's probably supernatural in some instances, but I don't want to be too spooky or spiritual. But it's certainly something that I can see. I can look in someone's eyes and I can almost hear the hurt, the brokenness. And it's funny that God would even give me that gift simply because for the longest time I was broken and no one saw. Partly because I really mastered wearing that mask. I mean, I dressed it up like couldn't tell me otherwise. And on the outside, it was looking good. I think about graduating from college at 21. I had my profession by the age of 21 in July that year, and I had bought my first home by the age of 22 and was living on my own, had my own car, paying my own bills, and, was going to a great church and growing in the Lord, so to speak. And, everything was good. It was good. But I never really focused on the who. And I can distinctly remember that morning when I had been going through the throes of my depression and it had come to a head. And that was kind of the morning I realized, all right, Charlene, you need to get help. You need to go and see a therapist. But I got up that morning and I felt good. And I had been going back and forth in my emotions, back and forth. One day I would be feeling good. The other day I would be feeling really down and didn't want to get out the bed and feeling depressed. And I mean, it was a fight to get up in the mornings. And my emotions ebbed and flowed so much so that I didn't know if I was bipolar or something. And that's not to discount anyone who might have that condition. I don't want to make fun of that. But it was like I'd be at work and I would be feeling good, and then the next instant it was like I wanted to go home and get in the bed and pull the sheets over my head. I didn't want to live. I was frustrated and angry and sad and depressed and all of those emotions, and it was up and down. But I digress. So that very morning, I got up and I felt good. I was, preparing myself mentally to go to work, to a job that I just was like, Lord, get me out. But as I was getting ready, I remember I looked in my mirror, my dresser mirror, and I didn't recognize the face who was looking back at me. I was 25. And I thought to myself, who on earth is this? And it kind of freaked me out a little bit, We did an exercise, and I'm trying to plug this in here, with the Spiritual Maker Mentoring Program, where we had to look in mirrors. And we'll do that in a moment. But wow, what a powerful exercise. And we don't often really really look into ourselves. But, so, I continued on with the morning and kind of brushed it off and got in my car on my way to work, and I just started bawling. I was crying like someone had told me someone close to me had passed away. I was just crying. And I said, Charlene, you got to talk to somebody. Something is not right. You have to talk to someone. And a few months before, my mom had come to visit me when I was in Atlanta, and she even said to me, because I was shutting people out. I didn't want to talk on the phone. I had stepped down from a lot of ministry responsibilities. I was just depleted. And my therapist coined it as functional depression, and that I had been functionally depressed for so long. Part of it was because I had bottled so many things up. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But I don't want to take too much time. But my mom had came and, she said, she said it to me real calm. And if anyone knows my mother, she's not really calm. She's really animated. And I think the older she gets, the more animated she gets. But I think she was kind of maybe walking on eggshells with me because I was snapping. And, you didn't really know what mood you would catch me in. And so she said to me, you think you might want to see a therapist or a counselor? Have you thought about that maybe? And I said, yeah, Ma, I thought about it. But I'll be okay, as I always say, internally, or even what I give off to people. And I knew, in my mind that, therapy was a stigma and people thought all kinds of things about it. But I knew, people that I was close to who had gone to therapy, and I knew the benefits of it. But I was like, I don't really need therapy. I'm just going through a rough time in my life, I was thinking more of therapy for people who are really clinically sick, anxiety, all these kinds of things, what have you. And so, I kind of brushed that off. But when that morning hit and I looked at myself in the mirror and I didn't recognize the girl, the young woman who was staring back at me, it frightened me. Along with the crying hysterically, then I had to pull it together when I got to work. But all of that, my point is, that's when, I think the Lord probably pushed fast forward a little bit in my life and began to deal with the who and then the why. And I can stand here today and I can tell you humbly but with so much gratitude that I am thankful that I went through that period of time where I was in, a pit. I'm thankful for the relationship that had not propelled me into it, but kind of was the icing on the cake where, it was just like, you know what? Forget it. This is just what it is. I don't have any purpose here. If I leave this earth, no one will miss me. So, he really began to deal with the who. Who am I? Because I had built myself, shaped myself by the opinions of others, what people expected of me, what they wanted me to do, what was just known to be Charlene's way of doing things or saying things or being this way. And I had gotten tired of that. I had built myself around those things. And it was a shell. And God was slowly tearing it down. And He got real raw with me. And I had to become very vulnerable. And this was a process. It didn't happen that a year, but it was a gradual process as I think back now of Him breaking that shell and getting to the heart of who I was. And I knew Christ, I knew I was a child of God. I knew that Jesus died on the cross and all that stuff. But I didn't really know who I was in Christ. I didn't know who God had made me to be. And it wasn't the persona or the shape that I had created or allowed others to create for me over the years. And then, in the midst of that, He also began to deal with me about the why. Why I made you daughter. Why I created you. Why I allowed you to go through the things that you went through. Why are you here? And so, before we can get to those things, we first have to get real. We have to unearth those things that have been holding us back, that have been shaping us when that was not what it ever was intended to be. And so that's part of the reason why we're here, to get rid of the mask. Masquerade time is over. Over. And it's time to get to the bottom of who you are, whose you are, and why you are here. Because if you can figure out those questions, then you can become the woman that God has called you to be. And then you can do the things that He has called you to do. And you can live the abundant life He has called you to live. When you answer the question of who, that's the becoming part, becoming more. Then, the doing part will fall right in there. And that will be the what. What am I called to do? When am I called to do it? Where am I called to do it? Those are the questions in that. And then the why. But you got to first answer the who and the why. Becoming more. And those other things will kind of fall in line. So I just wanted to let you guys know that and to share that with you. And, we can talk offline if you want. But that's just where I'm at. And that is why my heart is burdened for women. Why it's burdened for us to know our purpose. For us to know why we're here. Who we were called to be even before the foundations of the world. You were a thought in God's mind, the creator of the universe, before your parents got together. You were a thought in God's mind. Before the world was formed, He was thinking of you because He had a purpose for you to serve. Thank you.